The moment my mother stood up in court and screamed, "It was all mine," I thought the judge was about to rule in her favor. She had the better lawyer, the official will, and all the confidence in the world. I had nothing except an old envelope my grandfather told me to keep sealed until the day I truly needed it. Then the judge unfolded Grandpa's final handwritten note. The courtroom fell silent. My mother's lawyer stopped speaking. My mother's smile disappeared. And in less than a minute, the inheritance she had spent months fighting for belonged to someone she never expected. People always say you don't truly know someone's character until money gets involved. I used to think that was just one of those cynical sayings people repeated after ugly family fights. Then my grandfather died, and I watched my own mother become someone I barely recognized. My name is Emily, and if there's one person who shaped my life more than anyone else, it was my grandfather, Robert Collins. To everyone else, he was a retired carpenter who lived quietly in the same white farmhouse for nearly 40 years. To me, he was home. When my parents divorced, Mom was too busy rebuilding her own life to notice mine falling apart. Grandpa stepped in without ever making me feel like a burden. He taught me how to ride a bike, helped me with homework every evening, and somehow made burnt pancakes taste like the greatest breakfast in the world. He had a habit of saying, "You don't measure a person's worth by what they own. You measure it by who shows up when nobody's watching." I never forgot those words. Unfortunately, my mother seemed to. As Grandpa got older, I visited almost every weekend. Sometimes we'd work in his vegetable garden. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch drinking lemonade while he told stories about Grandma. Sometimes we barely spoke at all. The silence between us was comfortable. Mom's visits were different. She rarely came unless she needed something. If she stopped by, the conversation almost always drifted toward his investments, his house, or whether he'd updated his will. Grandpa never argued. He'd simply smile, change the subject, and ask if she'd like another cup of coffee. The older I became, the more I noticed the disappointment hidden behind that smile. One afternoon, after Mom drove away, Grandpa watched her car disappear down the road before quietly saying, "Money has a funny way of making people forget who's sitting across the table." I didn't know what to say, so I simply sat beside him. A few months later, Grandpa's health declined. There wasn't some dramatic accident. No shocking emergency. His heart had simply grown tired after 84 wonderful years. When I held his hand in the hospital during his final afternoon, he squeezed mine surprisingly hard. He smiled. Then he whispered something I'll never forget. "Sometimes justice waits until people expose themselves." Before I could ask what he meant, he closed his eyes and peacefully slipped away. The funeral was beautiful. Friends, neighbors, former coworkers, and even people I'd never met showed up to share stories about Grandpa's kindness. Mom cried during the service. At least she looked like she did. But less than 15 minutes after everyone left the cemetery, she leaned toward the family attorney and quietly asked, "So, when are we reading the will?" I remember staring at her in disbelief. Grandpa had been gone for barely an hour. The attorney scheduled the reading for the following week. When that day arrived, the room felt strangely tense. The attorney opened Grandpa's estate folder and carefully explained each part of the will. Then came the surprise. Most of Grandpa's financial assets and the farmhouse appeared to be left to my mother. She looked around the room with the unmistakable smile of someone who believed she'd won. "I knew Dad would do the right thing," she said confidently. Then she glanced at me. "You'll understand someday." I wasn't angry. I was just confused. Grandpa had never cared about money. None of it felt like him. When the meeting ended, the attorney handed me a small wooden keepsake box Grandpa had specifically requested I receive. Inside were Grandpa's old pocket watch, a faded photograph of the two of us fishing when I was 8, and one sealed envelope with my name written across the front in Grandpa's handwriting. The attorney looked directly at me. "Your grandfather was very clear. He said this envelope is not to be opened unless the right time comes." I nodded and slipped it carefully into my bag. I had no idea what Grandpa meant, but over the next few weeks, my mother acted like the farmhouse already belonged to her. She talked about renovations, selling old furniture, even removing the family workshop Grandpa had built with his own hands. Then one afternoon, a certified envelope arrived at my apartment. She had officially filed legal papers demanding I vacate Grandpa's house immediately. As I folded the notice back into its envelope, my eyes drifted toward Grandpa's sealed letter sitting on my bookshelf. For the first time, I wondered if the right time had finally arrived. The courthouse smelled like old paper and polished wood. I had never imagined I'd be sitting there because of my own mother. She walked into the courtroom, wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her posture was perfect. Her chin stayed high. She didn't even glance in my direction. Instead, she smiled at the attorney beside her. That smile bothered me more than anything. It wasn't nervous. It was confident, like someone who already knew the ending of the story. I looked down at the worn leather folder resting on my lap. Inside was the sealed envelope Grandpa had left me. I still hadn't opened it. The attorney had repeated Grandpa's exact instructions. Only when the right time comes. For some reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that today was that day. The bailiff announced the judge, and everyone stood. The hearing began. Mom's attorney wasted no time. He confidently explained that Grandpa's written will clearly named my mother as the primary beneficiary of the estate. He described her as a devoted daughter who had supported her father throughout his later years. I almost laughed. Supported him? She barely called unless the conversation involved finances. But this wasn't the place to interrupt. The attorney continued speaking. He argued that I had no legal ownership of the farmhouse and that my refusal to leave the property was creating unnecessary delays for the estate. Finally, he looked directly at me. My client simply wishes to honor her late father's intentions. Those words felt strangely heavy. Honor Grandpa? By trying to throw me out of the only place that still felt like home? My own attorney stood. Unlike Mom's lawyer, he wasn't dramatic. He simply placed several documents before the judge and spoke calmly. Your Honor, we believe the estate documents are incomplete. The room became noticeably quieter. Mom frowned for the first time. Incomplete, her attorney repeated. Yes, my lawyer answered. Mr. Collins informed multiple individuals before his passing that additional written instructions existed. Mom immediately shook her head. There are no additional instructions. The judge looked toward the estate attorney. Were any personal documents submitted with the will? The attorney hesitated. There was one sealed envelope addressed to Emily. Every eye in the courtroom turned toward me. My heartbeat became painfully loud. The judge asked quietly, Miss Collins, do you have that envelope? For a second, I couldn't move. Then I slowly reached into my folder and placed Grandpa's envelope on the clerk's desk. Mom suddenly leaned forward. That has nothing to do with this case. Her voice sounded sharper than before. The judge calmly replied, We'll determine that after reviewing it. Mom crossed her arms. It's just a personal letter. Maybe. Maybe not. The judge examined the handwriting. The seal appears untouched. It is, I answered. I promised Grandpa I wouldn't open it. The judge nodded. Very well. He carefully broke the seal. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the air felt different. The judge unfolded several handwritten pages. His eyes moved slowly across the first paragraph. Then, he stopped reading. He looked back toward the estate attorney. Was this document disclosed during probate? The attorney looked genuinely confused. No, Your Honor. It was never presented to my office. Mom shifted uneasily. Her confidence began to crack. The judge continued reading silently for another minute. Then he looked over his glasses. This changes the context of today's hearing. A quiet murmur spread through the courtroom. Mom immediately stood. Your Honor, I object. You haven't even read the document into the record. The judge raised a hand. Sit down. She remained standing. My father intended everything for me. Then, louder than anyone expected, she shouted. It was all mine. The entire courtroom froze. Even her attorney looked startled. The judge's expression hardened. Mrs. Collins. His voice was calm, but firm. One more interruption, and I'll hold you in contempt. Slowly, she sat back down. For the first time all morning, she looked nervous. I suddenly remembered something Grandpa had told me years earlier while we were repairing his fence. He'd smiled and said, "Greed is impatient. If you stay quiet long enough, it usually tells on itself." At the time, I hadn't understood. Now, I finally did. The judge resumed reading. According to Grandpa's handwritten note, he had intentionally left certain matters unfinished because he wanted every member of the family to reveal who they truly were after his passing. He wrote that words spoken after someone dies often reveal more than promises made while they were alive. The courtroom remained silent. Every sentence felt heavier than the one before it. Then the judge reached another page. He paused again. This time, even Mom's attorney leaned forward. The judge looked directly at him. "Counselor, were you aware that Mr. Collins filed an amended estate directive 6 weeks before his death?" The attorney blinked. "No, Your Honor. I was never informed." Neither was Mom. Her face lost its color. She turned toward her attorney, whispering something urgently. He started flipping through his binder. Faster. Then faster still. His confident expression disappeared completely. The judge slowly placed Grandpa's letter beside the official estate documents. He adjusted his glasses one last time. Then he looked directly at my mother. "Mrs. Collins, the final paragraph of your father's note specifically concerns you." The room became completely silent. I held my breath, because whatever Grandpa had written next was about to change everything. The judge unfolded the final page. He adjusted his glasses one last time before looking directly at my mother. Then he began reading Grandpa's words aloud. "If this letter is being read in a courtroom instead of around my family dining table, then I already know what happened." Nobody moved. Nobody even whispered. Grandpa continued. "I spent my entire life building a home, not just a house. If anyone values the property more than the people inside it, then they have already misunderstood everything I worked for." My mother stared straight ahead. The confidence she'd walked into court with was completely gone. The judge continued reading. "Emily never asked me for money. She never asked for my house. She only gave me her time. If you're hearing this today, then she already knows that was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me." I felt tears building in my eyes. Not because of the house. Because hearing Grandpa's voice, even through his handwriting, felt like having him beside me one last time. Then the judge reached the paragraph everyone had been waiting for. "To my daughter." The courtroom became perfectly still. "If you have attempted to remove Emily from this home before honoring my final wishes, then you have made your own choice." I instructed my attorney to prepare an amended estate directive. Should that happen, the farmhouse and all personal property described within it are to pass to Emily according to those updated documents. Mom's attorney immediately stood. "Your Honor." The judge raised a hand. "I've already confirmed the amended directive was properly filed before Mr. Collins' passing." The attorney slowly sat back down. He didn't argue again. There was nothing left to argue. The judge closed Grandpa's letter. Based on the amended estate documents and Mr. Collins' written instructions, the court recognizes Emily Collins as the lawful beneficiary of the farmhouse and the property identified within the estate. Mrs. Collins' request to remove her from the residence is denied. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then the judge struck the gavel. The hearing was over. My mother remained frozen in her chair. She looked at me as though she wanted to say something. An apology, an excuse, anything. But no words came. She quietly stood, gathered her purse, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. A week later, I unlocked Grandpa's front door. The house was exactly as he'd left it. His reading glasses still rested beside his favorite chair. His coffee mug sat on the kitchen shelf. Everything felt peaceful. Inside the keepsake box, beneath the old photograph, I found one final handwritten card I hadn't noticed before. "Real wealth isn't what you leave behind. It's who still feels loved after you're gone." I smiled through my tears. Grandpa hadn't left me the greatest inheritance because I won a house. He left me something far more valuable, the truth. And thanks to that truth, no courtroom could ever take away what mattered most.